Hi there, and welcome to the Surviving and Thriving in Residency podcast. I'm Charley Lowry, your host and director of GME Relations at PracticeLink. This show is all about exploring the world of graduate and undergraduate medical education. We'll dive into the real-life experiences, successes, and challenges faced by medical students, residents, and fellows, while also highlighting valuable tools to support you, whether that's financial planning, student aid, or the many free resources provided by PracticeLink. If you're thinking about med school, currently studying, or deep into residency or fellowship, this podcast is here to offer insights and support to make your journey a bit easier than those before you. Today, I am very pleased to have with us Alejandro Nieto Dominguez. Alejandro is a GI fellow at St. Louis University. Welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
Thank you, Charlie. I'm doing great. Great. Thanks for having me.
Yes. We appreciate you being here and sharing your wisdom with our listening audience today. So to kick things off, I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit about your journey into medicine and what inspired you to pursue this.
It's a long journey, but it all started. So I'm originally from Panama City in Panama, Central America. So it all started there. We had this high school trip. It was kind of like a mission trip that we do in our school, and we go to a remote area of Panama. And in this area, they assign us roles. My role at the time was to be like the paramedic of the group. Before that, I didn't have any training. I was a high schooler. So I think my first interaction with medicine at the time was just getting the basic like first aid teaching and training. And then during that time, there was one of our classmates that was also on the trip. Our trip there was to work on building a big kitchen for the community. And one Saturday that we were off from that, we all went to the river, and one of my friends got a scorpion sting really bad in his foot. And then like I was the one that like called the people, escalated, went into the ambulance and like discussed with the doctors there. And I think that kind of sparked my interest. Joined medical school. Usually we do it at the age of 17, because we start right after high school. So that until I finished in 2020, graduated, and then did 2 years of internship in Panama. And then
Yeah. So now, how was medical school? How was the application process? It's been a while now, but how was medical school applications, and did you know right off like which school you wanted to go to?
Oh yeah, there were not many schools in Panama to really choose from. There was only the private school called Universidad Latina, which is where I was, and then the government school, which is like the University of Panama. I ended up choosing the latter because it had a little bit more connections to the US. And at the time I was thinking about going to the US. So in the second option, there were a lot of graduates from that school. I ended up applying, I entered, and then from there it was just initially just basic kind of subjects like physics, biology, chemistry. So not really related to medicine itself. So it's kind of difficult, but right after like third semester, things started making a little bit more sense. And that's when I kind of also started studying to come to the US. It involved the kind of a dual curriculum. So I studied for my subjects in Panama, but also like I had to study for the steps at the same time. So in two different languages at the same time. And it's a little bit challenging, but I felt like a lot of the things that I learned from my like journey to the US actually helped me with my own classes. So at one point I ended up like just merging them into just one.
Looking back on medical school, what do you think were the biggest challenges? And I always ask our guests if you could go back and talk to yourself as a first year, second year, third year, fourth year medical student, what advice would you give yourself?
Wow, that's a difficult question. I remember that every step of the way, I feel like I've pushed a lot harder than now, even though now I've like been working hard. Back at the time, I felt like I would be working way, way harder in terms of hours, in terms of my demands. I would say take it a little bit lighter, but at the same time, you have to put in the hours and you have to put in the grind. So it's kind of difficult to tell myself, Alejandro, it's gonna be okay, just take it easy, because like it's still hard. What I mean by this is I think that sometimes I would be very, I guess I would say prioritize your time with family a little bit more, because sometimes I would miss things with family in order to study for a test, or in order to reassure myself that I was going to pass, even though I probably overstudied at some occasions. And maybe just, hey, just go take this afternoon off and go with your family, have dinner or something. And I think I missed a few of them. But in general, yeah, I think I would still tell myself to work hard and put in the hours. My brother is in med school and he's 10 years younger than me. So I feel
Okay.
like he asks me these questions and it's kind of hard, because it's like, dude, you have to put in the hours and study.
You're going to have to tell him to listen to the podcast if he wants answers.
Right. I will. I will for sure.
What about as far as stress in medical school? How did you handle stress? Was there any outlets you had, things like mind, body, spirit? How do you keep those in check during stressful times and take care of yourself during a lot of this?
Yeah, during med school, I think just keeping a good social life like out of medicine, I think was one main pillar. Is, going out with friends after an exam, or having a celebration after it, or just kind of keeping yourself in touch with other people that are struggling with the same dynamics is important. I think that helped. For me, it was always like, what am I going to eat after this exam? Or like, let's plan for this celebration. Or, yeah, that during med school, I think the biggest challenge probably was probably residency. I think the first year of residency, we can talk about it. I think overall in all scenarios, just I think, being able to interact with other people that are dealing with the same thing is probably one thing that helped.
That's good. So residency is coming up. How was the process of applying to residency? How did you finally decide where you wanted to land there?
So that was probably the hardest part, especially as an international medical graduate. Like, I feel like the average scores that you have to get, they have to be above a certain threshold for you to be attractive for the medical programs in the US to interview you. So, like, one thing I think I was glad that I had was that I really knew what I wanted to do early on in medical school, and I think that's important to set the goals. And if you really want to go to the US, just know that it's going to be a long journey, and it's going to be a little bit difficult, but it's not really about you just being born smart. It's more about you putting in the hours and actually learning the material over time. So, for example, during my first few years of med school, I started kind of studying with mostly through like forums and YouTube. I kind of like figured out which resources would be the best to use to study from, and then once I gathered them, I figured like, okay, I would have to take a vacation. Like, I would have to take time off from my vacation to just do a block of 4 weeks to be able to study. So just in my experience during that first time that I did that, that was probably halfway through my career during my med school. And I think so I would wake up at 8 a.m. and then probably go to bed at like 9 p.m. and study. I would just take breaks for lunch and dinner and breakfast. And basically, it would be a full day of studying for those 4 weeks. And after that, I took my first NBME exam. That was probably the hardest part, especially as an international medical graduate. Like, it, like, I feel like the average scores that you have to get, they have to be above a certain threshold for you to be attractive for the medical programs in the US to interview you. So I really knew what I wanted to do early on in medical school, and I think that's important to set the goals. And if you really want to go to the US, just know that it's going to be a long journey and it's going to be a little bit difficult, but it's not really about you just being born smart. It's more about you putting in the hours and actually learning the material over time. So, for example, during my first few years of med school, I started kind of studying with mostly through like forums and YouTube, I kind of like figured out which resources would be the best to use to study from. And then once I gathered them, I figured like, okay, I would have to take a vacation. Like I would have to take time off from my vacation to just do a block of 4 weeks to be able to study. So just in my experience during that first time that I did that, that was probably halfway through my career in during my med school, and I would wake up at 8 a.m. and then probably go to bed at like 9 p.m. and study. I would just take breaks for lunch and dinner and breakfast, and basically it would be a full day of studying for those 4 weeks. And after that, I took my first NVMe exam, like the exam that you take to prognosticate how you're doing, kind of like a self-assessment. And I did pretty bad, like honestly. So I was like, oh my god, like I barely passed. So I was like, oh my god, I have to keep studying. So I did that maybe 2 or 3 times more, and also studied during the course of the semesters. And by the second time, I had like I was at least two standard deviations above the mean in terms of like self-assessment. So it just putting in the hours. Now the transition, like once I got these test scores that are probably the most important aspect into applying to the US, then the other things were getting rotations, and in the US, having some exposure to it, to the US healthcare system. And then once, I had everything together to apply, I had graduated at the time and everything, I applied. And I applied to almost all the programs I could with the difficulties of visas and everything.
Do you know a number, how many you applied to?
Like
Probably a lot.
more than 200. More than 200. Yeah, a lot of them. A lot of them. I got interviews from all over the US, mostly cold states, I would say. The boy from Panama, I don't remember, and I ended up matching in Chicago, Cook County Hospital, which I think was a phenomenal place to train. I really enjoyed my training there, and Chicago was just a magnificent city to explore, and the hospital itself was an amazing place to train. And I met my now wife there. That's when I was an intern. So that's another plus about matching in Chicago.
Okay. At PracticeLink, we know the road to your first practice can be challenging. That's why we created the First Practice Fund. PracticeLink's First Practice Fund is our biannual scholarship program supporting future healthcare leaders in 6 key categories, from medical students to rural medicine providers. Applications for the next round open soon. Tell us your story and we'll help you take the next step. Visit PracticeLink.com for more information. Tell me about first year. Was it a lonely time? Was it scary? How well prepared were you walking in on the first day? Did you feel prepared at all? Or, I mean, I can't imagine the mix of emotions that are going through your head at that point.
It was difficult. I think it was probably the most difficult year of my career, even though objectively back in Panama, I had done some crazy hours and just like difficult work. Just to put it into context before I start talking about the first year, during my intern year in Panama, after finishing my med school, we do this as a mandatory process in order to get licensed back in Panama. We used to work about 32 to 36 hours every 4 days on top of the regular 8-hour shift, and we would get about 4 to 5 days off during a whole month. So they were long hours, being awake, being sleep deprived, and treating a lot of patients, and just you would have a lot of codes and a lot of situations where you were alone and you had to try to push through and solve things. And intern year in Chicago was harder than this, like in terms of, not even in terms of hours, just in terms of the mental load and the responsibility, and just like the growth was even bigger than that. So did I feel prepared? No, I don't think anything can prepare you for that. No, absolutely not. And like I came to the US 9 days before I started residency, because that's what the visa allowed. So I had 9 days to get my social security number, to get like everything, my phone number, my apartment set, everything, my state ID. So it was such a difficult process because I feel like you had to basically build a life from scratch in things that most people get throughout the course of their life in 9 days. You know, or at least that's how I felt then. I mean, my parents luckily were like came with me, so it helped. But anyway, first day they put me in GI, of course, great. And I like kind of thought that I wanted to do GI, and they put me in GI. So of course, I definitely did not impress anybody on the on that first month. Yeah, I remember that I had to present my first patient, and I didn't really even know how to present. It took me a long time to chart check the patient, and a long time to even talk about it. And I saw like the fourth year medical student that was next to me, and he was like a machine gun presenting. He was like just da, 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 just really good. And I was like, oh my god, I need a lot to I need a lot to work on. And I remember that I had only seen one patient, and they told me like, yeah, just review this patient. I didn't even know how to log into the system or anything, so it was all new to me, and it felt kind of like I felt kind of like an imposter going into the room and introducing myself as like the doctor or the intern. And over time, I think during those first 6 months, it was a lot of that, a lot of learning, a lot of how to present. Medical knowledge was somewhere in there, but just putting the pieces together was what was really hard. At the start, I just couldn't access it. Like I couldn't access what I had learned before that well, because there were a lot of things, a lot of layers that I needed to learn in order to be able to understand what's going on with the patient and understand how to communicate this effectively. These things were completely foreign to me. I felt lonely, definitely, especially during the winter months. Like I wasn't used to this kind of weather. Like I only visited the US and other countries where weather was like this, but never lived for a prolonged period of time. And I used to live in front of the hospital. So in the winter, it was basically me and the hospital and me, because there was nothing else other than like a Chick-fil-A. And after like a week of eating Chick-fil-A every day, like you kind of get done with it, no more Chick-fil-A. So it was hard. Yeah, those were probably the most difficult times. I had difficulty with just even sleeping during those times. It was difficult, but it slowly got better. I think you slowly start getting the hang of it and improving. I joined a climbing gym. That helped a lot. I had made friends with people also, going out with them and just sharing some of these struggles helped too. But yeah, definitely the hardest year was interning.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, we always talk about mind, body, spirit, and, staying out of the cafeteria and eating, just bad choices for eating food because you're on such a tight schedule. You're so busy, and sometimes you grab whatever you can get, and it's hard to maybe get out in the community and participate in things, just for time limits. So you have to. We always look at taking care of yourself in first year. Intern year is very hard, especially for someone coming from another country who's brand new to the whole system of everything.
Yeah.
There were other IMGs, international medical graduates, right, that started with you?
Oh yeah, and that I think was nice too, because I we struggled, but also having the American medical graduates was also really good because we could learn a lot from them. But having a mix of both within the residency program was great to be able to interact with all of them. My program was very international. We had people from all over the world, from almost all continents. It was a good mix. We learned a lot.
What was the moment in residency when you felt yourself growing into the role of a physician? Do you remember?
It's hard because there was not like an aha moment, but it was probably by the end of winter, I think, of that first year, when I felt, wow, like things are starting to get better. And I think that's when I did not think too much about how I was presenting, and like the perfectionism had kind of faded away a little bit. And I, instead of planning my speech, it was more about just telling a story. It felt like a little bit of a second nature, like kind of like when you start learning, when you know how to drive instead of when you're learning to drive. So that then I could focus on okay, actually the medical knowledge and what's the patient actually having, and like instead of my that the time that I spent or preparing my presentations was much less, so I could handle a bigger volume of patients and have better plans for everyone and just be able to incorporate a lot of more information into myself. And there was a moment where we had a list of patients and I could just review the chart and be able to reproduce in my own words without looking at any paper kind of what was going on with the patients. And I think at the time, I mean, you still obviously even up till this moment you need like a paper or help to be able to know, but not necessarily, it just helps. But at the time I feel like when I was able to reproduce things without having to look at a paper was probably when I learned the most, when I felt like I was more confident and could actually take care of patients. And that's when the growth started. And like that, probably 9 to 10th month of intern year.
Hello, my name is Sarah Eichinger. When I applied for First Practice Fund Scholarship, I never imagined how much it would impact my journey as a physician. The $2,500 award helped me focus on what truly matters, which is caring for patients and serving my community. If you're a current medical student, resident, or advanced practice provider with a passion for making a difference, this is the opportunity for you. Applications for the second round of First Practice Fund scholarships are opening soon. Visit PracticeLink.com today to learn more.
If you could give advice to new interns just starting out their journey, especially IMGs, but really any new intern, what advice would you give them?
So the first advice is definitely don't be too hard, and definitely it's gonna be okay. And I would give a different advice than I would give to my med school self. I think it's okay to not be on 24/7 during your intern year. You need like otherwise you can't feel the burnout. The burnout is real. Try to every day get one or two things that you want to work on and slowly work on them. Like maybe how to, a disease, for example, if you have a patient with cirrhosis, like how would you approach cirrhosis and try to learn a little bit from that. Patient directed learning is important. Self-care is probably the most important thing that I would say in the first year. Try to not get completely absorbed by the hospital and do things outside of the hospital, because that's what's not, at least for me, was what kind of helped me like survive, because it's not even thriving, it's just surviving that first year. Another thing is that you are not alone. Everybody that's with you, even though if they look on the outside that they're doing great and they're excellent, maybe on the inside they can be feeling that burnout sensation or kind of tiredness, and it's important to recognize if you're feeling that way and to seek help early, and instead of letting yourself kind of burn to the ground and then not be able to really function or even sleep. I think it's important. And probably you're at the higher risk during that first year.
Yep. I think it's easy to look at the other residents, like you were saying, the resident who was like a machine gun, but you got to keep in mind that at some point they were also in that intern year. So, they were there in those shoes too at some point. So it's hard to think about that because you're just seeing them as their present self, right? So it's hard not to compare yourself to someone else who just has so much more experience.
That's another thing. Yeah, you see the third years, you see the second years, and you're, whoa, like I want to get to their level today. Next patient, I'm going to present like them, and like that's impossible. Like these people took a long time.
Right. So you knew you were going to do a fellowship this whole time. It sounds like you were pretty much interested in GI. So tell me about the fellowship application process. How was that?
Yeah, so I definitely knew I liked GI. Now, I obviously had my doubts about how am I going to be able to apply to GI? It's a really competitive field. I think it's just because it's really interesting and a lot of people like it. But first year I tried to do some research. I think the most important aspect of GI is showing it, or any fellowship, is kind of show interest, try to meet mentors, try to join people that are doing that are interested in the specialty and work together on doing some research and try to get exposure within your residency program into rotations. And if your residency program doesn't have a rotation, try to see if you're able to get a rotation at another institution. But I think the most important aspect of GI is involve yourself in research projects. I think one thing that I guess probably you should know is if you're applying to a difficult specialty in general, is you're probably going to have to be self-driven and do some of this research by yourself or learn these things by yourself. Different ways to do research. Databases, de-identified databases are usually helpful if your hospital system has them. It's great. If not, there's many online that you could use. Talk to your senior residents. They can help with this. But the most important part was probably the research, which during first year, I think for me was probably not, I didn't do that much. Like maybe one case report I think I tried working on, but I didn't finish it until the end. And then second year, it was the year where I probably I did most of the work. It was the start of application season, and then by third year, it was just tying up the application season. But for any fellowship, try to be a good internist, especially in internal medicine specialty. Try to be good, to be reliable, to build your brand, type of your name. Try to never lie if you haven't done something, examine a patient. Always be honest about this. But next day wake up a little earlier and try to examine everybody you can. And things like this, just be dependable. I think be proactive. I remember that during one of my GI rotations, usually in GI we tend to, and I've noticed this now with fellowship, we tend to put most of the load into the fellows and give the residents or the students like one or two patients for the most part. Or that was the experience at my hospital in Chicago. But like if this was a new fellow and I wanted to kind of just see how I would practice if I was a fellow. So I asked him, give me more patience and I want to help you with this. Like, and just show proactivity goes a long way. He was really, really happy about this. And now that I'm a fellow and like thinking, wow, it would be nice if I had a resident that would, be as proactive and do this thing. So those things help, but just, always try to be the best person that you can be. I think things will continue to build, and then apply broadly once you're in your application season. I also applied to 200 plus programs.
Oh, that was my next question. Yeah, how did you end up at St. Louis University?
Well, I wanted to be at a program. I think at a program that was all the subspecialties of GI, and SU has everything, has transplant and has great motility department, advanced endoscopy, and general GI. There's a lot of positions. So I wanted to go to a place that had all of this, and also close to my wife too. That was another thing. My wife is in Chicago, so a place that was as close as possible was another thing with this academic kind of infrastructure in mindset. So it's good. I think being able to be able to drive on the weekends, most of the weekends to her, and also be able to be exposed to these cases of like patients that come via helicopter from a small hospital in rural Missouri with very rare liver problems is just really, really cool. Yeah, I've been enjoying my time in SLUF. It's been short but really sweet.
Yeah. It's a great place. I think it's a great place to be. I always give St. Louis University a plug because they do great things. I just think they're an incredible facility. They're a great school. They just do so much. And just some great people come from there. So, and stay there. So, you never know what your future might hold there. So how about your residency experiences? You feel like they prepared you well?
Oh, yes. Yes, I think the the bread and butter of medicine, it was exposed to all of it, and then the rare cases and the zebras, I've also seen quite a lot of them, and back from my initial internal medicine training. But also not only, and one thing that I enjoyed about my internal medicine training that's really important, and I see it now in SLU, is also all the other aspects of this, like the social aspects of medicine, all those challenges, with patients that sometimes have difficulty going to their appointments because they don't have a car, or they live really far away, and try to come up with a plan that involves those socioeconomic aspects that are into them. It might not be the number one guideline recommendation, but it's what would be best to the patient, because say you try to give them guideline, like what the guideline recommends, they might not even get it because of all the other social aspects. So just having that exposure being help to, besides just the medical knowledge.
Anything that surprised you at all as far as transitioning from residency to fellowship? Anything that came up as a big surprise?
Not really like so much of a big surprise, but I think it's different. It's more collegial. Fellowship is more collegial. It's smaller. They expect a lot more from you, but it's also really fun. It's a lot more mentorship, and I don't know. I think it's also that procedural aspect of GI has been new and really really nice. It's been really fun to be. It feels like a little bit like a video game to be able to learn how to do endoscopies, colonoscopies. It's really nice.
Nice. So here we go again. How about advice? What would you share? What kind of advice would you share with residents who are considering a fellowship, and especially about weighing the decision to subspecialize?
I think it's just important to know what you'd like to do and what your priorities are. I felt like I was honest with myself and knew that I wanted to do GI, but I also like internal medicine. So I felt that worst worst case scenario, if I didn't match, I would have been okay too, because I would have not been able to do these procedures. But the advice that I can give to the people that are in the same shoes is, first identify which specialty you want, and be open to changing your mind too, if later on you decide that that's not really what you want. Some people come in thinking that they want to do pulmonary critical care, and then they do 1 month of MICU, and then they decide they hate it and they don't want to go to the MICU ever again. You're allowed to change your mind. If you decide that you want to do something and then you actually don't, then that doesn't mean that you're now set to do this. That's one thing. And then, as I said, try to involve yourself with like-minded people, and go from there. Try to see what your priorities are too, like if you'd like to prioritize location, or family, or hospitals. Like these things are 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 important.
How about AI? How are you using AI in your daily life?
Well, AI is amazing. I think it's going to definitely change the world of medicine. AI, we have it in our endoscopy lab. We have a polyp detector AI tool that helps us, like, detect polyps. Sometimes we don't turn it on because it's like, okay, we want to practice ourselves to be able to spot them. But when it's on, it's really nice. It's very sensitive, so it sometimes picks up things that are not really polyps, but it doesn't miss if there's a polyp. So it's really good. In general, other AI tools like Open Evidence, which is from the Mayo Clinic, I think, and other institutions also are involved with it. It's also really good. You can easily, browse guideline-based therapies, and know information that you can then convey to your patients, or it's like a trusted resource that you can use to improve your plans and make sure that you're doing the right thing, because medicine changes, and it changes rapidly. For example, not too long ago, we had a patient that we needed to place a PEG tube, which is a feeding tube in the stomach, and in the past we had to hold a medication and a blood thinner called Plavix, and now the latest guidelines say that we can continue them. So double check if you ask the AI, should I continue or discontinue this? It would tell you based on the latest guidelines, and they would provide you with the evidence behind it. And now there's also some scribes that are existing now that save you some time, can record conversations between, like HIPAA protected conversations between you and the patients, and you can discuss with the patients, and if they're okay, you can use it to improve the information that improve your recall of the information that the patients are giving you, and it starts writing your notes, which then you can pick up and continue using to convey specifically what your patients are telling you, instead of, because sometimes when you're writing down things or trying to remember, you could miss something that could be helpful later on. So those things are initially, and I think other things like AI in interpreting like CT scans and helping catching things, for example, like lung nodules that are, possibly malignant, are things that are coming up in the future and would be helpful in let's say, in this specific case of lung nodules, triaging which CT scans should be looked up first by the radiologist versus which ones could wait, because if the AI alerts that this scan is concerning, then the radiologist can pick up that one first and get care to the patient quicker. So
yeah,
that's really nice.
It's great. Yeah, it's amazing to see how quickly it's evolved, and it's going to be amazing to see where it goes from here. Yeah, a lot of programs being built, a lot of people coming up with new AI inventions every day in medicine, for sure.
Oh yeah.
I think it would definitely help with some studying as well in medical school, right? If you had AI in medical school now, it would be a great way to study.
Absolutely. This open evidence and also ChatGPT are both introducing new features in which you can use them to study. Like, you can put on a topic and then they would ask you questions or develop kind of like a small curriculum for you to study.
So for our listeners, you may not know this, I hope you do, but so you are a First Practice Fund scholarship recipient from PracticeLink. Our first time giving away the scholarships this spring. What inspired you to apply for the scholarship?
Well, I had interest in research and continuing my research when I was in residency at the time, finishing residency. And now that I'm in a place with a little bit more support, I think this PracticeLink fund would be really helpful into being able to develop some of this more data analysis driven research that requires some statistical analysis. And this, I think the main use of the PracticeLink fund would be towards that.
Yeah. As far as the funds go, do you think that you'll use those as far as the first practice, or do you think that will be more just for some research projects that you have coming up?
Yeah, I think since my first practice would really start after a few years, I think most likely it would be kind of to jumpstart my first practice by having some research involved within my resume, and just some things that I'm curious about within the field of GI, or that I will be developing throughout my career.
Yep. Well, congratulations on that. That's a really great thing. For those who are not aware of First Practice Funds, that will be opening up soon for the fall as well. So we give away 6 scholarships, $2,500 each. 4 will go to residents, 1 will go to an APP, and 1 will go to a medical student. So keep that in mind. You'll see the link on www.practicelink.com. Outside of the hospital, what keeps you grounded, and how do you ground yourself once you step out of the hospital?
Now during fellowship, it's been mostly this quality time that I spend with my wife on the weekends, just driving. Honestly, the drives to and from Chicago are really relaxing. I really enjoy it, just listening to music and singing my way through the drive, honestly. But now we have this tradition that we've built with my new fellows, which luckily have also become my friends. And we do this thing on Thursdays where we go to a different place and have dinner together. And all Thursdays we're not on call. So it's the only day of the week that neither of the 4 of us are on call, because it's taken by one of the third years. So we all go out and try to talk about what's been going on in our lives. How's endoscopy going? How's the VA? Because one of us is in the VA. All the other ones are in SLU. And how's the service? And we kind of talk our way. And I've been playing a little bit of this game called League of Legends that I used to play with my friends. I've been retaking that because I haven't climbed that much this past few months because I'm trying to save my wrists a little bit.
So what is next for you?
I think during this few months, the most important thing is to learn the GI basics. I just finished my internal medicine boards. So finally done with that, and just try to study as much as I can GI and improve my procedures. One thing that is difficult in GI is doing colonoscopies well, because it's really hard to reach the cecum. It's not as simple as just inserting a tube and it all of a sudden gets to the end. There's a lot of technical difficulties. So learning how to do this and improve would be probably the main thing. And then after I have these things narrowed down and I feel more comfortable, I think I probably plan to start kind of doing some research or quality improvement projects within the department.
Okay. So then your spouse, Sarah, is she planning to pursue a fellowship at this point, or no?
No. She's going to be a hospitalist somewhere in St. Louis, I hope. She's taking her boards on the 27th. So I think after that we'll probably discuss she'll probably start looking out to explore some of the areas, some of the places around here.
Hopefully we can help her out here at PracticeLink as far as helping her find that right first practice there in St. Louis. So we'd be happy to do that.
Yeah.
Any other advice that you have today for anybody who is maybe pre-med, medical students, residents, or fellows, anyone listening, any last advice that you would give?
I think one advice that I told myself and I keep telling myself is, if it's good, a lot of people would want to do it, and it doesn't mean that the odds are against you, that you shouldn't pursue it because there's a risk of failure. Just jump, and hopefully everything will be fine, but at least you will have tried, and you will always be okay with that decision of trying, even if you fail. Sometimes the regret would come from not trying and telling yourself, what if? The odds are usually, you usually can't control these odds. So if you put in the work and you put in the hours, don't worry about what's out there, what the statistics say. Just do it, and you're one person, and you can beat these odds if you really try hard.
That's great. That's absolutely great. Well, on behalf of myself and PracticeLink, we would like to thank you, Dr. Alejandro Nieto Dominguez, for being a guest on our podcast.
Thank you, Charlie. It was a pleasure talking to you for this hour, and hope to see you soon.
For our listeners, please feel free to reach out with any questions or feedback about anything we covered today by emailing me. If you wish to receive more information about PracticeLink, you can visit our website, www.practicelink.com. My name is Charley Lowry, and we thank you for listening.